What a joy it is to be here this morning. Thank you for the invitation. It's an awesomely humbling experience for this Arkansas country boy to stand here, and I pray that you will ask the Lord to bless our session together. What I want you to do is just access a Bible, if you will, and turn it to Psalms 101. Psalms 101. Here in this psalm, David writes that he will behave himself wisely. Psalms 101 is about our becoming a people and a person of integrity. It's about how to scrutinize ourselves and examine ourselves and then grab a hold of our want to by our will and say, this is the kind of person that I'm going to become through self-control. When we talk about self-control, it's not a very popular subject today, but we understand as God's people that if we're going to be His person, if we're going to be His people corporately as a church, we will have to exercise some self-control. God created us free moral agents, that He created us flesh and spirit, and then He gave us a will, so that we can control our desires, our attitudes, our behavior, and yes, even our destiny. Paul tells us in Romans chapter 7, Galatians chapter 5, that we have two natures within ourselves. We have a flesh nature and a spirit nature. And Paul says there is a constant battle between these two natures. In Galatians chapter 5, Paul says, this is the kind of person. This is the kind of people that we're going to become if we give in to one of these natures or the other. He says if we choose to live by the flesh, we will become sexually immoral, unclean, indecent, idolatrous people, filled with hatred, strife, jealousy, wrath, selfish, dissension, disunity, drunkenness, reveling, and such like. But if, on the other hand, we choose to be led by the Spirit, if we will allow the Spirit of God to lead us through the Word, this is the kind of person we will become. A people of love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, meekness, self-control. This might be a little controversial, but let me say it and listen to me carefully. Because of our genetics, because of our environment, because of our upbringing, and maybe other factors we do not understand, we may have a tendency, we may have a weakness, a propensity for a particular sin or for a particular group of sins in our lives. For instance, some may have a weakness for a form of sexual immorality, be it heterosexual or homosexual. Others must deal with some forms of addiction, maybe alcohol, drugs, materialism, etc. Still others among us must deal with hate and lying, gossip, jealousy, anger, rage, dissension, sowing discord, troublemaking. You see, different temptations appeal to different people with different intensities. Not all of us have to deal with all of the sins and the temptations of the world, do we? There are just some things that I have to deal with, some weaknesses that I have, and there's not thousands of sins involved, hundreds or even dozens, but in my life, and maybe in yours, it gets down to what? 2, 3, or 4 that I struggle with on a daily basis. Truth is, temptations usually do not lie in wait for us, I believe, as much as they are actual flaws and weaknesses in our own character, in our own flesh nature. And these flaws, these weaknesses compel us to search out these sins and the accompanying temptation. Isn't that what James said when he said, We are drawn away into sin by what? By our own lust, by our own weaknesses, by our own flaws, by our own flesh nature. But listen to this. Here's the good news. God gave us a will, a free will, and with that will we can control our weaknesses, our propensities, our lust, our flesh nature, our temptations. Truth is this morning that our will is the most powerful thing in our life. Did you know our will is stronger than the will of God? The will of Adam and Eve was stronger than the will of God in the garden. God's will was and is that they and that we be a people of righteousness. That Adam and Eve continued to live where God placed them, in a presence with Him, in a fellowship with Him. But their will overrode God's will. God has created us in a way that our will reigns supreme. We will become the people and the person, corporately and individually, that we will to become. The decision is ours. We know this is true, don't we? Paul says in Philippians 2, have the mind, have the attitude, have the heart, have the disposition of Jesus in you. If we cannot control our heart, if we cannot control our attitude, if we can't control our disposition and our behavior, then why did Paul command this? I want you to know now in this lecture that this is not the only place in the Bible, in Psalm 101 or in Philippians chapter 2, that this idea of choosing and making a choice is to be found. Listen to Joshua 24:15. Choose you this day whom you will serve. Joshua says the choice is yours and mine. And not only that, we ought to make the choice when? Today, right now. In this lecture, we ought to decide, I'm going to behave myself wisely. I'm going to become the person that God wants me to do. Satan is the one that says there's a more convenient time. That's what he told Felix, right? Ruined his life as far as we can determine, and it'll ruin ours. The time to make the choice is ours, and the time to make the choice is now. Philippians 1:27, let your manner of life be worthy of the gospel of Christ. Question, does my life make the gospel look good to others? Can others see Jesus in me? How I lived yesterday or the day before, how I'm living today and tomorrow. Do people look at me, see Jesus in me, and say, I'd like to know more about that kind of life, that kind of daily walk? Choose. And the choice is ours. Philippians 2:5, have the mind in you which was in Christ. Wouldn't this make us a people of integrity? Ephesians 5, look therefore carefully how you walk, not as unwise, but as wise, redeeming the time, because the days are evil. We choose how we live. We choose what we're going to do with each moment in our life. Behaving ourselves wisely is not just a Sunday affair. It's something that we must do Monday and Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, because the times are evil. I think when you sum up these scriptures, we hear the echo of Paul from Bob Grace's lesson yesterday morning, where Paul says, do not be drunk on wine, but be filled with the Spirit. The bottom line is this: who is influencing my life and yours? The wine of the world or the Spirit of God through the Word? Under whose or under what influence am I living today and you living today? Let's read what David has to say. Psalm 101. I will sing of loving kindness and justice unto thee, O Jehovah. will I sing praises. I will behave myself wisely in a perfect way. Oh, when wilt thou come unto me? I will walk within my house with a perfect heart. I will set no base thing before my eyes. I hate the work of them that turn aside. It shall not cleave unto me. A perverse heart shall depart from me. I will know no evil. Whoso privately slandereth his neighbor, him will I destroy. Him that hath a high look and a proud heart, I will not suffer. Mine eyes shall be upon the faithful of the land, that they may dwell with me. He that walketh in a perfect way, he shall minister unto me. He that worketh deceit will not dwell in my house. He that speaketh falsehood will not be established before my eyes. This is David's vow of integrity, and I believe it ought to be ours. Church, class, before we can teach others, before we can admonish and instruct one another and others effectively, we must demonstrate our own willingness to behave ourselves wisely. Amen? How do we do it? Make 3 points. David says, 1, have an honest heart. Number 2, he says, I'm going to protect my eyes. And number 3, he says, I'm going to watch the company I keep. Number 1, David says we must walk with a perfect heart, a blameless heart, an honest heart, a heart of integrity without being a hypocrite. The spiritual heart of the Bible, what we know, is more than the blood pump. It's the mind. It's the seat of our emotions. It's the seat of our decisive action. It is that will that we've been talking about. With the heart, we either believe or doubt. With the heart, we either accept or deny God. With the heart, we dream and we reason and we plan. It is this spiritual heart within us that elevates us above the rest of God's creation. When God looks at the individual, He doesn't look at the outside as we look at. He looks at the inside. He sees the heart. He doesn't see the color of our skin. He doesn't see our political clout, our popularity, our power. He doesn't see our educational accomplishments, the clothes that we wear. He sees the real individual. You see the real, what you're looking at this morning, you don't really know the real Randall Caselman, do you? You don't see him. The real Randall is a heart condition. And only God sees that. You may see evidence of it as we begin to get acquainted with one another and know one another. Remember, it was God who told Samuel, you look on the outside, but I look on the inside. Therefore, I'm going to select the king for you. The real, genuine person is in the heart. Helen Keller once said, the best, the most wonderful things in the world cannot be seen or touched, but felt in the heart. When Sir Walter Raleigh lay his head upon the executioner's block, the officer asked if his head lay right. And Riley replied, let my heart be right, and it matters little how my head lies. Our outward being is not all that important. What's important this morning is what is going on in your heart, in mine. Is it right with Him? And are we right with one another? I want to talk a little bit about some things the Bible has to say about the heart and the part that it plays in our behaving ourselves wisely. Proverbs 23:7 says, for as a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. I want you to know this morning what we think we are. What we think we are. What we think we become. We will never rise above our thoughts. Thinking evil thoughts, sinful thoughts, makes us a sinner. Makes us evil. Thinking good and godly thoughts make us like Him. Those who think about money all the time become what? Materialists. Adultery begins within the heart with lustful thoughts, sexual desires. No person ever committed adultery without it entering his thought. Is dreaming first? Murder begins in the heart with anger and hate. No wonder Paul wrote, "Brethren, whatsoever things are true, whatsoever things are honorable, whatsoever things are just, whatsoever things are pure, whatsoever things are lovely, whatsoever things of good report, if there be any virtue, if there be any praise, think on these things." Why would Paul say that to us? Because what we think, we become. If we want to behave ourselves wisely, David says, the first way to do it is control your thoughts. And then here in Proverbs 23, his son just backs up that statement. Proverbs 4:23 reads, "Keep your heart with all diligence, for out of it are the issues of life." Real life. Real life. We know it, but it's so easy for us to forget it. Real life is not made up of the material, but of heart issues. 2 Corinthians 4:18, Paul says, "We are not to look on the things that are seen, but on the things that are unseen. For the things that are seen are temporal, but the things that are unseen are eternal." What is my life made up of and yours? Where is our focus? What goes on in our heart? Are we concerned with the seen? Or do we deal more on a daily basis, and do we struggle more and worry and fret more about the seen or the unseen? The unseen things, class, are things like faith and hope and love. Proverbs 6:18, "A heart that deviseth wicked purposes." Solomon says, it is our imagination that ultimately controls our behavior. Can I ask you an embarrassing question or two? Are you with me? What do we imagine? What do we fantasize about? What do our dreams consist of? When the day is over and we're sitting in front of the fireplace with a cup of cappuccino, and our mind is just shifted into neutral, where does it naturally land? And what do we dream of and fantasize of and think about? Does it go to evil and the devising of evil and thoughts on ungodly things, or on things that are unseen? Love, faith, hope. Proverbs 6:18 speaks of a heart that deviseth evil purposes. May we not be found imagining evil. Matthew 15:8 has Jesus saying, "These people honor me with their lips, but their heart is far from me." I think that we can say this morning that Jesus is saying we can come here to church, to worship services 3 times a week. We can come to lectureships regularly and still not be right with Him. Because what's important is what's going on the inside. We can look good outwardly and still be far from God, a long ways from God. Ananias and Sapphira, don't you know they looked good? Don't you know the church was proud of them that day? But inwardly, their heart was full of evil. Paul speaks to the Ephesian elders about those who look like sheep. But that's not where their mind is. Inwardly, they are vicious wolves, he says. Mark 7:21, 23 contain more Jesus thoughts on this issue. "For from within, out of the heart of man, evil thoughts proceed, fornications, thefts, murders, adulteries, covetings, weakness, deceit, lasciviousness, and an evil eye, railing, pride, foolishness. All these evil things proceed from within and defile the man." Wow, what an ugly list of sins originating in the heart, Jesus says. Hebrews 3 says, "Take heed, choose, brethren, lest happily there be among you, any one of you, an evil heart of unbelief in falling away from the living God. But exhort one another day by day, so as long as it's called today, lest any of you be hardened by the deceitfulness of sin." I think the Hebrews writer is saying to us, Satan can plant some seeds, and if we will allow those seeds to grow, they will produce a crop of sin and doubt and unfaithfulness. And we could just list a whole bunch of seed plantings this morning, couldn't we? Seed plantings like one religion as good as another. Plant that in your heart and see what happens to it. Seed like, well, we are not expected to be perfect. Each one of us at least can have one sin, one vice that we can revel in. Or seeds like grace covers all of sin, regardless of the attitude of the heart, of the mind, regardless of whether we care or not. On and on we could go with seed plantings that Satan places in every heart, every heart. And the Hebrews writer says, you cultivate that and it'll grow a crop that will ruin us spiritually. How do we control that? Control what we think. I'll close this point by noting what Luke wrote in Acts 16:14, speaking of Lydia. "And a certain woman named Lydia, a seller of purple in the city of Thyatira, one that worshipped God, heard us, whose heart the Lord opened to give heed to the things which were spoken by Paul." I think this verse says that God is opening my heart and your heart anytime and all the time, that we will listen to the truth. With an attitude in my heart that, God, you just speak and I will do what you want me to do. Amen? Let your eyes fall down to verse 4 of our text. David closes this thought by saying, "A perverse heart shall depart from me. I will know no evil." Indeed, if we're going to become a people and a person of integrity, if we're going to behave ourselves wisely, we will have to begin by controlling our thoughts, our imaginations. Secondly, David contends that to behave ourselves wisely, we must make a covenant with our eyes. Look at verse 3. "I will set no base thing before mine eyes." King James says, "I will set no wicked thing before my eyes." The NIV says, "no vile thing." The New English Bible uses the word sordid, no sordid thing. Do you remember what Job said in Job 31:1? "I made a covenant with my eyes. How then should I look on a virgin?" I got to tell you this. We, including your preacher this morning, need to make a covenant with our eyes. I'm going to give you some statistics provided to me by Bill Wheeler. Bill is a preacher in the Lord's Church. He works for the Arkansas Families First Foundation. It's a lobbying group that stands for Christian and family values. I think these will surprise you. Today, there are more than 4.2 million pornographic websites available to us. This accounts for 12% of all sites posted on the web. Attached to these sites are over 372 million pornographic pages. Can you get your mind around that? In a survey, let me back up. These sites are serviced by, listen to this, 68 million search engine requests every day. In a survey, 47% of people who regarded themselves as Christians admitted pornography was a major problem in their home. Didn't say, 47% didn't say once in a while. 47% said that pornography was a major problem in their world, in their life, in their daily walk. Rick Warren found in a survey of 6,000, quote, pastors that 30% had viewed internet porn in the past 30 days. 53% of men belonging to Promise Keepers said they visit porn sites every week. 1 in 7 calls to focus on the family's pastoral care hotline is related to pornography. Today's Christian Woman found in 2003 that 1 in 6 women, including those who claim to be Christian, struggled with some form of pornographic addiction. Not some form of pornography, but some form of pornographic addiction. A study of the London School of Economics found that 9 out of 10 children aged 8 to 16 had visited internet porn websites either intentionally or unintentionally. Class, these figures should stun us. They're not from some wide-eyed fanatic. They're not from some fundamentalist on a tirade, but they are from well-meaning people who are trying desperately to warn us of our culture's greater danger. It's time, isn't it, church? It's time, isn't it, preachers? It's time, isn't it, elders? It's time, isn't it, ladies, that we make a covenant with our eyes. That we say, I'm going to watch what I read in the videos and the movies and the websites that I visit. We're without excuse here. God has given us a will, and your will and my will rule supreme. Will we? Thirdly, David says, behaving ourselves wisely means that we watch the company we keep. And then he begins to list those that he is not going to keep company with. Note the end of verse 3. I hate the work of them that turn aside. It shall not cleave unto me. David is saying there's some people that I'm not going to keep company with. There's some people that I'm not going to walk with. There's some people that I'm not going to invite into my house. There's going to be some people that I'm not going to allow to be around my family, to my children, my wife, and my grandchildren. Reminds us, doesn't it, of what Paul says in 2 Corinthians 6, be not unequally yoked with unbelievers. For what fellowship have righteousness and iniquity? Or what communion hath light and darkness? And what accord hath Christ with Belial? Or what portion hath a believer with an unbeliever? And what agreement hath the temple of God with idols? For we are the temple of the living God. Even as God said, I will dwell in them and walk in them, and I will be their God, and they will be my people. Wherefore, come ye out from among them, and be ye separate, saith the Lord, and touch no unclean thing, and I will receive you, and will be your father, and you will be my sons and my daughters, saith the Lord Almighty. David is saying, if we don't watch the company we keep, we're going to move toward spiritual ruin. Paul says, be not deceived. Evil communications, evil companionship stunts Christian growth, spiritual growth. You see, the problem is this, that Christian character, that integrity cannot grow in the wrong kind of environment. You can't grow oranges in Alaska. And you don't study democracy at the University of Leningrad. It just doesn't happen. And we cannot become God's people in person if we keep company with the unrighteous and continually run with those that don't care about God and His righteousness. We're only fooling ourselves. Folk, influence will have its work and its way. Regardless of what our culture says, it will. And regardless of what we think, it will. Can I say this and you understand where I'm coming from? I'm convinced that many times withdrawing fellowship can and should be a personal choice, yours and mine. I'm not talking about what the church ought to do. I'm just saying that regardless of what the church does, you and I have a personal responsibility to stay away from those who are ugly and to do not draw us closer to God and closer to one another. Even the casual Bible student knows that God has always demanded that his people withdraw and be separate. Right? Notice with me quickly those that David says we ought to shun. They may not be the ones that you think. Verse 5, those who slander their brother, who privately slandereth his brother, him will I destroy. Church, David's talking about gossip. He's talking about character assassination. He's talking about saying things about a brother that a brother wished we wouldn't say about him or sister. People come to me and they say, well, I don't gossip because the things that I say, they're the truth. They're not lies. Hey, folk, that has nothing to do with gossip, whether it's true or not true. That's not what gossip is. Gossip is saying something about somebody else that they wish we wouldn't say about them. That's it. Period. Stop. It's interesting to note that the word gossip is not found in the American Standard Version of 1901 that we're using for this lesson. But I want you to know that the words backbiting and whisperings are. Do we get the message? That's what gossip is. I think this admonition will also include those that sow discord and cause disunity. James says, speak not against another. Brethren, he that speaks against a brother or judgeth his brother speaketh against the law and judgeth the law. But if thou judgest the law, thou art not a doer of the law, but a judge. Let me read you from the homiletic commentary in our psalm. In order to constitute slander, it is not necessary that the word spoken be false. Half-truths are often more harmful than whole falsehoods. It's not even necessary that a word should be distinctly uttered. A dropped lip, an arched eyebrow, a shrugged shoulder, a significant look, an incredulous expression of countenance, nay, even emphatic silence may do the work. The wise householder will keep the slander out of his family. Indeed. Indeed. 3 times in 20 years, I have challenged our eldership to put on the bulletin board at the Bella Vista Church of Christ this statement: I will not gossip and I will not listen to gossip, and let us sign our names. So far, they've not accepted that challenge. Elders, I challenge you in your congregation. Do it, and it'll stop it. It's the way we behave ourselves wisely. Verse 5 talks about pride. Him that hath a high look and a proud heart I will not suffer. It's interesting to note that when God got ready to make a list of sins that he hates the most, that pride was the top of the list. Did you know that? 6 things which Jehovah hateth, yea, 7 are an abomination to him. Haughty eyes, our King James says a proud look. Listen to these verses from Proverbs 16. Every one that is proud in heart is an abomination to Jehovah. Pride goeth before destruction, a haughty spirit before a fall. Better is it to be of lowly spirit with the poor than divide the spoil with the proud. In the New Testament, Paul twice in Romans chapter 12 addresses this. He says, we had not ought to think more highly of ourselves than we ought. And then he says, at the end of the chapter, we had not ought to be high-minded, nor wise in our own conceits. James says, therefore, or wherefore the Scripture saith, God resisteth the proud, but giveth grace to the humble. Verse 7, the deceitful. He that worketh deceit will not dwell in my house. He that speaketh falsehoods will not be established before my eyes. Lie, cheating, bearing a false witness has always been condemned by God. It was at Mount Sinai. Paul says, lie not one to another. David is saying that we are not behaving ourselves wisely when we spend time with those who lie, who cheat, who deal in deceit of any kind. Well, David turns from the ungodly to the pure heart, to the righteous, to those of integrity, and he says, I will keep company with these. Look at verse 6 with me. Mine eyes will be upon the faithful of the land, that they may dwell with me, that he that walketh in a perfect way, they shall minister to me. I got to tell you that Christianity is made up of one anotherness, togetherness, fellowship. We are to care for one another and pray for one another and instruct one another, teach one another, serve one another, encourage one another, be hospitable one to another, forgive one another, be of the same mind one to another. Over 100 one another passages are found in the New Testament. We can grow together, folk, by spending time together. Let the world be the world. We can reach them with the gospel. That's not what I'm saying, and you know that. Got to quit. But I want to take your mind to 2 Peter. Peter was talking to a church that was undergoing or about to undergo some severe persecution, and he says, here's the way you become a person and a people of integrity. Add to your faith virtue, knowledge, temperance, patience, godliness, brotherly kindness, love. He said if you have these things and you abound in these things, you're going to be God's person. Yes, salvation is a free gift of God. Yes, we are saved by grace, but man has his part in this salvational process, and that's faith. Paul plainly says we're children of God by faith, for as many as have been baptized into Christ have put on Christ. And Peter says we are to add to our faith these virtues. Now, it's not just enough to complete our obedience by faith and baptism. Peter says there is a life to be lived. And this life will make our calling and election sure. That's what I want, don't you? Then today, right now, with this session, may God help us to start behaving ourselves wisely. May God bless our study together. Thank you.